Hi, everybody. Welcome back to MyFIntelligence. Today we have another episode of Day in the Life, and we are here with a very special guest, Wadee. Wadee, do you mind introducing yourself and telling us about what your summer internship was?
So basically, I grew up in Pakistan for about 18 years, came to Toronto about 2 years ago, I think. Came here, I was initially in chemistry, didn't really want to do chemistry, so I switched to Rotman, decided to go for finance and economics, and within that, it was a choice of what do I do in that. So joined a couple of clubs, met a couple of my seniors and upper years. They sort of pushed for investment banking. So for example, I joined Toronto's Investment Council, a very sell-side focused club. Started networking with people at National, and from there landed my second year summer at National in their investment banking department for their real estate team. And around the same time is when I also joined the small PE shop called Turtle Holdings, and that's where I'm currently working as well. And I worked there for 8 months, got to see a live transaction go through, and now I'm just working with that company to sort of grow it into more areas.
You really had quite a long journey that I didn't really know about before listening to Awesome. Can you take a step back really quick for a second and actually explain in the simplest terms possible what investment banking actually is? So how we can make this really comprehensible for a first year student who just heard about it for the
Yeah, I guess the simplest way that what investment bankers do is that, so there's two aspects. There's one, raising capital. So in that aspect, we as investment bankers basically help companies raise either equity capital, which is that they issue shares or do an IPO or anything like that. Or there's debt capital, where we basically help them raise debt. And that's mostly dealt with debt capital markets or your corporate banking division at times, or your investment banking team, depends on the bank structure. So that's basically that. We just help them raise capital, and by helping them raise capital, what I mean is that we build those fancy models on them, see how much you should be sort of going for that IPO. There's a lot of this. There's the devil in the details, like what's a roadshow and all that stuff, but that's too complicated. At a really high level, we just help them raise equity, raise debt. A second thing that we do is we also help companies merge or acquire, which is basically that if I have company X and it's like, hey, I want to expand into, I don't know, Europe. How should I go about that? Now they can either go to a consultancy, and the consultant can say that, oh, you should start with, you should open up this branch and start making these shops and everything like that. Or they can come to an investment bank and we can say that, hey, maybe you should just acquire this person in Europe. And we basically help them throughout the acquisition process, whether it be what is the best price that they should buy the company on, how should they go about the transaction. And again, there's devil in the details with deal terms and due diligence and all that, but at a really high level, we help them acquire or sell, or we help them raise capital. That's pretty much it.
Amazing. And could you tell us a bit more about the real estate team that you were a part of? What sort of deals did you guys work on? What sort of companies were you involved with, and so on and so forth?
Again, real estate can be divided into a couple of sort of niches. So there's property level and then there's REIT level. So in the investment banking real estate team, you don't really deal with property level stuff, because that's property development and brokerage and all that stuff. We deal with REITs. REITs are basically companies that own a portfolio, like a huge portfolio of real estate properties. So REITs can be segregated into different types. There can be a multifamily REIT, which is basically those condos and apartments that you see. There could be industrial REIT, which is industrial sites. Basically, there are diversified REITs that sort of hold different things. And there's retail REITs, which basically, for example, your malls, etc. So like we were constantly in touch with clients. We were still managing our relationships. We were still pitching to them. Like nothing had changed other than the fact that you might not be having a M&A activity going through right now. We had a couple of deals, but they were on hold. Some of them have actually been announced. For example, Northview Apartments, that's a big one. And then in the past, National had worked on some big ones as well. For example, Dream Global, that was a big deal. So like we were pitching to different kind of clients, be it other companies, be it buy-side clients and stuff like that. So it was really interesting. And I think that in terms of execution, it was the raising capital side. So debt capital was pretty famous over the summer, equity as well, or some hybrid debentures. So that was pretty fun. So those are the kind of deals I got to see. And then there was an entire modeling side. Like even if you're pitching something, if the model might be simplistic, it might not be detailed line item by line item, like, but it was still a good experience to sort of learn how it works.
Okay, so you've mentioned the modeling skills that you need in investment banking. Can you tell us, first off, if you knew how to model coming into your internship, or if you learned it on the job, and basically how did you learn to model?
Yeah, I think that, so the first part of the question, I think it's a mix of both. Like I knew coming into the job how models work. The funny thing is that didn't really matter at all, because when it comes to a REIT, you don't really use DCFs. Like you use comparables, which is like applies to everything, but different kind of comparables. But with REITs, it's a very specialized industry. And what you usually want to make is your net asset value model, which is completely different from a DCF. And then there's industry specific stuff like a cap rate, asset value, and all that stuff. I would say that modeling REITs is actually a bit easier than standard DCF. That was a learning curve. So learning how to do that model and sort of the key line items and the key things that metrics you should be focusing on in the REITscape was different. But I would say if I was in a group, for example, diversified, like where you would apply a DCF, for example, in some companies, that would have been, I still would have to learn. That's guaranteed, because there's, when we do it for clubs, for example, in TSIC or any of these clubs, it's really high level, right? Like you're not getting the nitty gritty. But when you're in the job, you have to be accurate. Like you have to be as accurate as you can. There's no such thing as 85% correct. It's still a 4.0. You need to be like very close to 100% correct. So it's definitely more detailed. So that's like sort of the modeling side. And I brought some experience in, like the accounting still helped. Like accounting for all companies is pretty similar. So that side still helped me understand like how stuff is working and all that stuff. But modeling was a bit different, so I definitely had to learn. And I think my team did a pretty good job. We spent like the first 2 weeks, my associate walked both us interns through all the models they had, like the complicated ones, the easy ones, and all that stuff. Our analysts recommended us to make models on our own from scratch, and I got to make like 3 different models on like either a spin-off or for a pitch and all that stuff. So it was pretty good learning experience. And how I learned to model, I would say, I think there's no right or wrong way, but the most effective way is to just do it. And I think that if you just make a model, get someone who's a bit upper year and like knows how the stuff works to review it, I think that's probably the best thing you can do. And I think that joining some certain clubs, etc., helps with that, but you can definitely do it on your own as well if you're not part of the club.
I'm curious to know, what were your responsibilities as an intern and what was the nature of your job?
Well, in my role, my first week, it was pretty simple. Companies are releasing their earnings, Wadee, just update these earnings in our comp sheet. And as simple as that, like update everything ranging from like, I don't know, there any debts they issued, any subsequent events, any key metrics, etc. Really simplistic, like kind of not that exciting, but still very simplistic. But I would say that first or second week, that simple task actually helped a lot. Because when you're going through 10Ks and 10Qs and all that stuff and press releases and 8Ks to find that number that you really want to find, you get to know the company more. So my analyst, for example, would say that if you're going through a 10K of this REIT, read the first 5 pages, like the company overview, business operations, and the risk one, so that you at least know what the company does. And I would say that first 1 or 2 weeks, even a task that was really, really simple and like sort of mundane, just helped a lot, because going through all those companies, I was familiar with the REIT landscape within 2 or 3 weeks then.
Can you tell us some of maybe let's say the top 3 skills that you picked up during your internship?
Top 3 skills. I would say Excel speed, very important. My analyst would say that if you were in the office, we would cut off your mouse, like, or at least like we would not let you use a mouse. But so from work from home, I kind of try to apply that as much as I can. So now like Excel, I don't really need a mouse. I would say second most important skill was PowerPoint decks design and the speed of PowerPoint execution as well. Like in investment banking, people think that you're going to be modeling all the time and dealing with companies. Is actually the exact opposite. You're going to be spending most of your time in PowerPoint. And it's not, it could range from something as boring as aligning logos, like that happens, it's part of the deal, or it could be something as exciting as building a deck from scratch. Third skill, the best way to phrase it would be, I would say analysis and research, honestly. Like I know it's really high level, but like operating all these financial softwares, for example, going Capital IQ, Bloomberg, and like knowing how these work and finding the data and sort of like analyzing it, it already falls within that. I think that's one of the best skills, and that really moves forward with your modeling as well.
Did you have to learn how to use VBA for Excel or any other coding language like Python, anything like that? Do investment bankers ever use those sort of coding languages?
I can't speak for if investment bankers ever use this. I would assume that at some point they might, but in general, no. That's more of a sales and trading thing.
Okay. Not even VBA?
No, not necessarily, because even if you have VBA, like your firm, chances are they'll already have preloaded macros, because like if you want to run something, then you can just run them automatically. You don't really need to write the code yourself.
What was something that you disliked or didn't necessarily enjoy about the job?
I guess the only thing I kind of disliked was that like if you work on something, for example, on like 5 or 6 days, like, and that's a good grind, like you're working on it like a solid amount of hours. 5 or 6 days and that thing doesn't go through, that's just kind of disappointing. Like, but you get used to it. Like you get hit with that disappointment within the first month, and then you just move on. And like you get used to it. But I would say initially that's what I disliked. But other than that, I really enjoyed it, and like it was pretty fun.
Awesome. So I guess obviously you really like your job. What would you say was your number one favorite task to do?
My favorite part of the job was using the Capital IQ add-in. I absolutely love that add-in. Like because for example, my seniors would give me something to do, and like you would usually go to Cap IQ or some of the financial statements, you would look manually pull that. But like I kind of try to automate as much as I can. I just really like the automation process of things because it just made my life easier. Like the task that would take 2 hours, now you just need to change the date and boom, you're done.
I guess we all kind of know that investment banking is a bit of a stressful job. Did it ever get overwhelming for you? And if so, how did you mitigate that?
I mean, it did. Like, I'm not gonna be one of those people who's like, nah, I'm like a hardo. I went like 12 hours and I'm gonna brag about it. It was like for example, long weekends were usually bad in the sense because like your client, like if you had a long weekend, client kind of wants something on Tuesday. So you'll be working Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and like there was 1 a.m., 2 a.m. nights on the long weekends. So like it was stressful in that sense because you had to get stuff done. But like it's not really the urgency of the things; it's the correctness. Because if you mess up one number, one formula, like you're screwed. Like you're just screwed at that point, right? So that was the stressful part of it. But I would say that the best way to get over that is honestly in your first month when they give you simple tasks, just try to maximize your speed and accuracy in those very simple things.
Do you mind telling us a bit about what your hours actually were like? Obviously, they're going to be long. Did you sometimes have breaks where you could end early, like, I don't know, 5 p.m. or something, or was it only long nights?
And we would log off by 7 p.m. or something like that, or 8 p.m. And there were some times where you would be logging off at 10 p.m., 11 a.m., and some days where you'd be logging off at 1 or 2. But those 1 or 2 a.m. days were very, very few. And because like the group culture, it really boils down to your group culture and how busy you are in terms of what's going on. I think we were very efficiently managed. And I think that was pretty fun. Like our MD was nice enough that he was like, hey guys, by the way, like if you want, like we can end the internship 2 weeks early as well. If you want to enjoy summer break and stuff like that, you can even try out another group, like a really accommodating guy. And like, I think that in that sense, our work-life balance is pretty solid.
And finally, Wadee, what's one piece of advice that you have for somebody who wants to get into investment banking and thrive at the position?
Honestly, do everything. There's no prioritizing. There's no such thing as, hey, I'm gonna focus more on networking and grades can go to the side, and I'll focus more on my extracurriculars, and then like networking can sort of be made up from my extracurriculars. Like, no, you just gotta give 100% on all of those things. And like, I'm not saying that people who don't give 100% on all those things won't get a job. I'm just saying to maximize your chances, you wanna do 100% of all 3 things, right? And in that sense, I would say that's my piece of advice. But if one thing really stands out, in my opinion, would be just keep networking. Like that is probably the most important thing in this entire industry. Like you can have your extracurriculars, have something going on. If you're already behind on those 2, if you're in that situation where you're behind on those 2 and you're really close on time, like the recruiting season is starting or it's 5 or 6 months away, just start networking. That's probably your best exit strategy out of the situation you're in and going in and trying to break into the industry.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We both learned a lot, and I'm sure anyone else watching did as well. If you'd like to learn more about how Wadee actually got this position, make sure to check out his landed job. And thank you very much. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, no, anytime.